The mailbox stood beneath the awning near the entrance, slightly rusted at the corners, the metal lid dented as if someone had once tried to close it too hard and never bothered to repair the bend, a modest fixture, surrounded by cracked tiles and an old bench that no one used anymore, facing a patch of trees that never grew tall enough to provide real shade, but tried, year after year, with fragile branches and pale leaves. Every Friday morning, just after the sky shifted from deep gray to something resembling light, she would come down the steps in her quiet shoes, holding nothing in her hands, sometimes with her coat unbuttoned, her hair pinned back loosely, and she would stop at the mailbox, not to collect anything, not to leave anything, but to stand, waiting, as though the air itself might offer something if given enough stillness. She never opened the box immediately. Instead, she lingered, brushing her hands softly over the edge of the metal, letting her fingers rest there while her gaze drifted across the street, never fixed, never expectant, but always aware. The act had become a kind of ritual, performed not out of necessity but from something older than habit, something rooted in repetition, in silence, in the rhythm of a week that knew no other marker but that pause, that moment where breath hung slightly longer in her chest. There was, or had been, a man who passed by each Thursday, not at the same time, not with precision, but often enough that she had learned to recognize the shift in sound when his footsteps approached, the way the gravel cracked more softly beneath his weight, the way his silhouette moved past the hedge without pause, a simple figure in a dark coat, neither hurried nor slow, never turning his head, never speaking. She did not know where he went, nor when he had first appeared in her periphery, only that at some point his presence had begun to shape her anticipation, not with urgency, not with longing, but with a kind of quiet alertness that began on Wednesday evenings and crested softly by mid-morning on Thursday, when she would find herself listening even through closed windows. And yet, she never looked directly at him, nor he at her, their paths never crossed, their glances never touched, but something between them moved, unseen, like the shared vibration of two strings tuned to the same frequency, resonating faintly through the hallway air. Then, one week in early spring, he didn't come. Thursday passed in silence, and the gravel remained undisturbed. She stood a little longer at the window that day, her cup growing cold in her hand, the shadows outside stretching slowly along the ground as if they, too, were waiting. On Friday, she still went down, stood by the mailbox, but the light felt different, thinner, more brittle, and the breeze that moved the edge of her coat did not carry the same expectation. She opened the lid, more slowly than usual, found the same stack of envelopes, advertisements, the same silence folded into white paper. She took nothing. Closed it again. Let her hand rest there a while longer. The following week, he did not appear again. Nor the next. And slowly, without admitting it to herself, she began to understand that something had shifted, not dramatically, not with finality, but like a rhythm losing its beat, like a ritual no longer mirrored. Yet she continued to come down every Friday, the time unchanged, the gesture intact, as though she had become part of something larger than her own intention, something that required her presence even if the other half no longer arrived. She began dressing with more care on those mornings, not extravagantly, not out of vanity, but with a deliberate softness, a clean collar, a darker scarf, a quiet arrangement of earrings she hadn't worn in years. She touched the mailbox as before, adjusted the angle of her posture, and looked not across the street now, but toward the sidewalk he had once crossed, the space where his figure had once passed, and though she told herself she wasn't watching, she was, not for him, but for the echo he had left behind, the breath of something unfinished. She never told anyone. The gesture was too small, too private, too woven into the threads of days that others would never see. And yet, the space near the mailbox had begun to hold something more than silence, a memory of movement, a stillness shaped by former presence, like the way a bed holds warmth after someone leaves, or how a closed book sometimes feels heavier with the story not yet resumed. In time, she stopped expecting. But she didn't stop coming. And the mailbox, though unchanged, became something more, not a container, not a point of exchange, but a place where something invisible had once passed between two people who had never spoken, never touched, never even shared a smile. And still, she stood there, every Friday, quietly holding what had never been given. The weeks settled into one another like the slow falling of dust across an untouched surface, quiet, constant, and almost imperceptible, except to someone who knew how to see time not in hours or events, but in pauses, in the way light thickens against a wall that has learned to wait. She continued to go down every Friday, her steps neither heavy nor hesitant, her presence by the mailbox not dramatic nor ritualized, but steady, like the turn of breath in a sleeping room. There were mornings when the sky was full of fog, and the world beyond the gate seemed to vanish into whiteness, and others when the sun angled through the trees in such a way that the shadows made the cracked tile shimmer for a moment, and yet nothing in her changed. She arrived. She lingered. She left. But beneath the repetition, something had begun to shift in her hands, not visibly, not in action, but in weight. The stillness had thickened. What had once been a silent waiting had become, gradually, a quiet acknowledgement that waiting had transformed into continuation. He no longer passed. His absence, at first a disruption, had become the new shape of the hour. And she accepted it, not with sadness, not with resignation, but with the kind of calm that comes from understanding that some presences do not end, they only withdraw into the fabric of habit, like music that continues long after the piano falls silent. She thought about him less now, not because he mattered less, but because his shape had become part of her own. The memory of his footsteps had been absorbed into the morning air. She no longer searched the edge of the hedge for movement, no longer turned her head at the sound of approaching shoes. Instead, she noticed smaller things, the shift of dust on the mailbox lid, the small crack in the cement below it that had begun to widen with the cold, the feather that remained for 4 days on the corner tile before the wind took it away. Her attention had not diminished, it had only turned inward, like roots deepening beneath a still surface. Then, one Friday, late in the season when the trees held their last stubborn leaves and the mornings arrived with a sharpness that pressed into bone, she found something different. A letter. Not addressed to her. Not inside the mailbox. Just resting on top, a plain envelope, weathered at the edges, sealed, with no name. It could have been left by anyone. Could have been a mistake, a delivery gone astray, a child's game. But something in the slant of it, the way it was placed not at the center but slightly to the left, exactly where her fingers usually paused, told her otherwise. She did not open it. She stood with it in her hands for a long while, the cold beginning to press through the wool of her gloves, her eyes resting not on the writing, for there was none, but on the envelope's weight, the bend of the paper, the small imprint at the edge as if someone had held it too tightly before letting go. Then, gently, she slipped it into her coat pocket and went upstairs. She placed it on the table by the window and left it unopened for 3 days. Not out of fear. Not even out of reverence. But because she needed the presence of it to exist first, to be with her, silently, without expectation. When she finally opened it, she did so with care. There was no letter inside. No message. Only a single pressed leaf, copper brown, fragile, intact, and the faintest scent of something she could not name, something clean, something like wind over old stone. There was no signature. No date. Only the suggestion that something once moving had chosen to be still, and in that stillness, had left something behind. She did not cry.